Hello guys, this is part 17 of edu.net tutorial. In this video we will discuss what is strongly typed datasets and advantage of using strongly typed datasets over untyped datasets. So, and how to generate a strongly typed dataset. Using Visual Studio. Let's understand strongly typed dataset with an example. Let's first design a web form that look like this. Okay, that look like this at the right side of this presentation slide. Let's flip to Visual Studio. First of all, I show you this presentation slides, full presentation slides. Okay, this is the presentation slide. Now what? Now flip to Visual Studio. Here I have new ASP.NET web form application. First, let's set this style attribute on this div tag, and let's set the font family to Arial. Means come here. Style, font family, set to Arial. Let's now drag and drop a text box control onto the web form. Where is the text box? Here it is. And then a button control. Where is the button? First of all, we need to and finally a grid view control. Grid view control is present under the data tab. Here, let's drag and drop the grid view control. Now let's flip this web form to the design mode. Double click on the button control. To generate the click event handler. We are going to write some edu.net code here. So let's bring in the required namespaces. Require system.data. And system dot data dot SQL client. and third namespace is system.configuration. Within the web config file, I already have a connection string with the name ultimate, which is pointing to ultimate catalog on my machine. So go to the web file. Where is the web config file? Here it is. And you can see the name of the initial catalog ultimate and the database name is ultimate. So here we have the ultimate database or catalog, and within that we have this table, this table. So we need to retrieve the student information from this table and display that within the grid view control. Okay, this table. Now to encapsulate the student information, let's create a student class. So go back to the Visual Studio and create a student class. With properties ID, name, gender and total mass. So let's flip to Visual Studio. We already flipped to Visual Studio. Let's add a class file to this project. So add we go directly to this piece of now name it as student CS. And to speed things up, I have already implemented the properties. So let's copy the code from the notepad here. Go back to your Visual Studio. So let's copy, we have, and this is very straightforward code with 4 auto implemented properties: ID, name, gender and total mark. So within the page load event here, if not is post back, here if is not is post back. So if we have a get request for this page, at that point of the time execute the code that we are going to write here. Now we are going to write some edu.NET code here. Again, to speed things up, I have implemented that already, so let's me copy and paste that here. Means go to the notepad, come down and copy these 4 lines and paste them here. And this is very straightforward edu.net code that we have been writing in a previous session of this video series. So what is this code doing here? We are using configuration manager class to read the connection strings from web config file, and using that connection string we are creating an instance of SQL connection. Here is the SQL connection class, and we have our select query here, which is again a very straightforward select star from table students, TBL student. So using this select query and this connection object, we are creating an instance of SQL data adapter. Okay, here this line. Now let's go ahead and create an instance of datasets. Let's call it dataset equal new dataset. So dataset name it as dataset is equal to new dataset. So here this dataset is not a strongly typed. This dataset is not a strongly typed dataset. Dataset that are not strongly typed are also called an untyped dataset. Now let's invoke data adapter field method. So data adapter field method, and fill this dataset object that we have created. Now fill this with dataset object that we have created, and we want the data to be stored in students table. So student table within this data set means we have first fill method with dataset object that we have created, and we want the data to be stored in student table within the dataset. Now let's go ahead and set data source for the grid view control. So one dot data source now we have created this student class here. Now within the student table, every row is a student object. Means here within a student table, every row is a in this student table. In this student table, every row is a student object. So we want to convert every data row that is present in the students table into a student object, and we want to set that student collection as the data source for the grid view control. Now to do that, we can use for each loop. So from data row in data set, dot table, so from data row in dataset dot tables, so within this dataset, the name of the student table is students. So if I table name is student. So now I am going to invoke as enumerable function. Dot as enumerable function. So what is this function means as enumerable? So what is this function going to return? Look at that. This function is going to return us enumerable row collection of data row, which allow us to write link code. Okay, against that set of data row. Means what is this functions going to do? What is this function is going to return? Look at that. This function is going to return us enumerable row collection. Enumerable row collection. Okay, here look at here of data rows of data row, which allow us to write link code against that set of data row. That set of data row that are returned. Okay, so basically what we want to do is we want to select a new student object. So select new student object. And then this student class has got this student class has got Four properties: ID, name, gender, and total marks. So let's populate them using the data row, using every data row that is present within this data row collection, this data row collection. Okay, so data row of ID should give us student ID. Okay, here I need to change it to capital D. So ID is equal to data row but this code here is going to return the ID in an object format, but we need to convert that to an integer because this property ID is integer. Let's go ahead and use convert class. Means if I type here ID, we need to convert it into an integer, and we have other property as well. First of all, we need to convert it. And we have other property as well. So let's initialize name. Again, data row of name. Name is string. Name. Name is string. So we write here and similarly we need to initialize gender property. So gender equals data row of gender. Gender is also string. So let's go ahead and convert that to string. And finally total marks. Which is equal to data row of total mark. Uh, so data row of total marks should give us students total marks, but this code here is going to return total marks in an object format. But we need to convert that to an integer because this property is an integer. Total mark is an integer. So let's go ahead and use convert class and convert that to an integer. So okay. Okay, so this piece of code is going to loop through every data row and create student object for us. And that collection of student object is going to be data source for the grid view control. And now let's invoke data bind method. Something is missing here. I think there is no grid view one. What happened to it? So what we need to do here? Oh, no. It is asking that expected. Okay, just check it and let copy this line from here and paste it. If you see this notepad, okay, what idioticity yaar. Okay, okay. Let's invoke data source bind method, grid view bind method. Let's copy this, go back to your coding and paste it here. Okay, at this point let's go ahead and run this application. So when we run the application, get request will be issued for web form 1.aspx. So run this. So get request will be issued for web form 1.axpx. So we should be able to retrieve all the student information and display that with in grid view control as expected. Now we want to provide such functionality as well. Let's say for example if I enter letter M here and then click the means if I enter M here and click this button, we want to display all the student whose name starts with letter M. Okay, so let's see how to implement that. Now keep in mind here we are storing this. Okay, we are storing this data set now in a session variable. We have not done that yet, so let's store that in a session variable using the key data set. So let me copy this and paste it here. So this is the session variable and the key is dataset. So that we can so that when we click this button, means if we click this button, you don't have to make another trip to the database. So we are going to retrieve the dataset from the session variable. When we click the button, so within the button click event handler, the first thing I am going to do is retrieve the dataset from the session variable. So first of all we need to see why is there. Let me check the code here once again. What the idioticity. Okay. So in the button 1 click event handler, the first thing I am going to do is retrieve the dataset from the session variable. So dataset equals session let's retrieve that from the session variable. Let's typecast this to dataset. Okay, so we have the dataset with all the student rows Now I'm actually going to copy this piece of code and paste it, means copy this piece of code and paste it right here. Okay, now if the end user did not enter, means if the end user did not enter any uh, name here, means if the end user and has not is not did not enter any name here, and then if I click the button, we want to list all the student. Okay, so if this text box does not have any name of the student, then we want to list all the students here, there. So basically we are going to check. So basically we are going to check. So basically we are going to check if the value within the text box is null or empty. What we want to do, we basically want to retrieve all the rows from the data set. And display all the student within the grid view control. That is what this piece of code going to do. Else, if it is not null or empty, meaning the end user has typed something, means if the end user has typed something here within the text box, then we are going to change this code a bit. So we want to filter the rows based on what the end user has typed within the text box. So before we select, I mean before construct a new student object, we are going to use a where clause. Means you should copy and paste it here. And before we construct a new student, we are going to use a where clause. Where data row of name. Data row of name. Okay. data row of name dot to string, and let's convert that to upper for comparison. So if that name starts with whatever, whatever the end user has typed within the text box, and let's again convert this to upper for comparison. If the name that is present within the respective data row, if it starts with whatever characters that the end user has typed within the text box, then go ahead and construct a new student. Otherwise, the student object will not be constructed. So if it will be excluded from the result, okay, a simple where clause here. All right, so let's go ahead and run this and see if the search functionality works as expected. So run this. First close this. Now run this. Where I see the string is. Okay. Here should be. Okay. Now run this. So let's type letter M here and click button. Look at that, we get our students that we expect. Let's type the letter A. Click button. Okay, so it is working as expected. So here we have implemented this code. Using untyped dataset, we have implemented this code. Uh, we have implemented this code using untyped dataset, a dataset that is not strongly typed. Let's see how to achieve the same thing using a strongly typed dataset. Let's add another web form. Where is the web form here? So our web form name is web form 2.axpx, and now let's see the step to generate a strongly typed dataset. Now first we need to add a dataset object to our project. Now click the data tab. Here is the dataset and name it as student dataset. Okay, now click the add. So look at this file. In this file, extension is XSD, XML schema definition. Okay, means there is now the name of the file is student dataset. So now click on view, and no, we don't need to click at view because we have our solution explorer there. Look at this. Within the server explorer we have data connection. Under data connection we have expand the ultimate database, and here is the table. So we want to generate a strongly typed dataset for student table. Means if you go here, okay, so we want to generate strongly typed dataset for student table, TBL students. So all we need to do from the server explorer is drag and drop table onto the designer. So go back to the Visual Studio and drag and drop this table here. So this is going to create a strongly typed dataset, and look at the name of the dataset here. It says TBL student. Let's change it to as students. So here we so save the changes. So here we have a strongly typed dataset. Now if I expand the student data set designer.cs, look at this. We have student dataset, which is a strongly typed dataset. Here, this one, and it is inheriting from dataset. This one, from this one, dataset class. So all strongly typed dataset inherits from dataset class. Okay, so within our web form to AXPX, so within the page event load, So within the page event load, where is the if not post is post back. So student data set table adapters namespace. If is not is post back. Not is post back. Student data set table adapter. Means to speed things up. Uh, okay. So student copy this piece of code. Go back to your coding. Okay, so student dataset table adapters namespace. Within that namespace, I have something called student table adapter. Okay, so let's create an instance of that. We have created the instance of that new student dataset table adapter dot student table adapter. Again, within student dataset, there is something called student data table. Student dataset, there is something called students data table or data table. Look at that. I am getting IntelliSense, but if I if I remove this coding here and then type here, what do I get? Not this one. Means so IntelliSense everywhere. So here we are creating an instance of students table adapter object. Now we are creating an instance of students data table, and let's call the object as students data table. Okay, this is the object student data table. Okay, and let's call the object as student data table equals new here student data set dot student data table. So we have the data adapter, object, we have the data table object, there is the student data adapter, student data table object. Now all that is left is on this data adapter. We have fill method again, just like we have fill method again, just like how we have fill method with the SQL data adapter. So we want to invoke the fill method. So again, go back to your coding. I think I have already typed it. This is the fill method, and we want to fill this table with students data table. Data table, okay. Student data, okay. So we have a student information now within this students data table. Within this student data table or student table, now let's go ahead and set data source for the grid view control. So on the grid view control, we first, on this web form, we first need to have the grid view control to speed things up. So first of all, you need to do what? Go back to your web form 2 and go to the web form 1 and copy this piece of code from here. Go back to your form 2. Where is the form 2? Here, and paste it here. Okay. So the code behind gridview1 dot gridview1. Okay, here you need to type dot data source equal to again we are going to write some link code here. So from, let's call the variable as student in. Student 10. Look at that. What is this student table going to contain? It is going to contain student object. So basically, we want all these students. Okay. So basically, we want all student. So basically we want all the student, okay, and we want to create a new anonymous object here. So let's select student.id. Select new, not student. What is happening to it here? Okay, copy this code from here and paste it right here. Because data table should be there, I was making spelling mistake. Okay, student.id, look at that, I am getting installations. If we do it again here, so here we get installation there. uh, Even on the student object, automatically I don't have to loop through. Okay, here is in this installations you will see the student, so automatically here, so I don't student object automatically here, I don't have to loop through rows here, because this is strongly typed data set. Okay, we will talk about those differences in just a bit. So we need student.id, we need student.name. Student.gender, student.total marks, okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. But before we do that, let's flip this web form to the design mode and then double click the button control. Flip to design mode and double click the button control. To generate the click the double click at the button control to generate the click event handler. Let's run this now. Okay, look at that, we are on web form to AXPX form, web form to AXPX. And we have the same behavior, all the student information is retrieved and display. But where is the, I have not, okay, we once again run this. I think I have not imported. uh, we have to here also need to have those namespaces data using system data SQL client using system.configuration. Okay, now let's run this once again. Look at that, we are on web form 2. What is happening to it? It's not showing that things also. I'm not getting the full. Something went wrong here. Did I mention this grid view binding? No. That is why I was not getting that. Making a silly mistakes always. Okay. First of all, we need to do what? Check. Okay. Now save this and run it once again. So look at that, we are on web form 2 AXPX and we have the same behavior. All the student information is retrieved and displayed, but on this web form we are using a strongly typed data set. Let's go ahead and implement that filtering as well. Okay. So if some kind of if string dot is null or empty, so if same kind of, okay, so if same kind of if string dot is non null or empty, so if the end user did not enter anything within the text box control, then we want to display all the student. So first of all, we need to store this students data table within a session variable. Means if you go back to your coding here, copy this session variable and paste it here. So let's go ahead and do that. We have done this. So session of, let's use the key. This is the key data table equals our student data table. And here let's go ahead and retrieve the student tables. Let's copy this. Means copy this student data table. Okay, adapt table student table. Means within the button click event we need to use this line Okay, student data set dot students data table and students data table. This one, copy this. Is equal to whatever we have stored in this session. So session of data table, and we need to typecast that. Okay, so at this point we have students table. All that is left is to copy this piece of code. Means copy this piece of code from here and paste it here below this line. Okay, on the other hand, actually let's move this code out of the if block. But we have not seen any block right here. Now from the notepad, you have to type this piece of code. We have paste this code out of the block. We were typing this coding in the block. Why we have uh, paste it out of from a block? Because we need a student table in the else block as well. Okay, so else means we need a students table in the else block as well. Okay, so now I am going to copy this piece of code and paste it here as well. In this piece of code. So go back to your notepad and from there you can, okay, But if the end user has typed something within the text box, then it will not be null or empty, which means it is going to come to the else block. Okay, if the end user has typed something in the text box, then it will come to the else box, in which case we want to filter it. So let's use a where clause. We have used this where clause. This is the where clause. Student dot name dot to upper starts with whatever the end user has typed within the text box. So text box dot text dot to upper. Okay, so the same kind of code again. So let's run this and see it works in the same manner. So I enter letter M. So I enter letter M. Means now if I run this, click button. So look at that, we only get students with that starts with letter M and we get the output that we expect. Alright, so we have implemented the same functionality using an untyped dataset and a strongly typed dataset. So where is the presentation slide? What are the strongly typed datasets? Strongly typed dataset is generated based on the database schema. Okay. If you recollect how we have generated the strongly typed dataset, we have dragged and dropped it. We have dragged and dropped it from the server explorer onto the designer. So based on this table, you know the type data set is automatically generated. Okay, this is automatically generated. So basically strongly typed data set is generated on the database schema based on the column types. The data type for the student class is inferred. So using the database schema, so using the database schema, the strongly typed data sets are generated and strongly typed data set derives from dataset class. We have seen that as well within the designer. within the designer. Here. So the student data set. So the student data set is inheriting from system.data.dataset class. In a strongly typed dataset, the database table columns become properties. Data tables column becomes properties, and the type associated with each column is known at design time. So now if you look at this piece of code that we have written on webform2.axpx, so here we have, we are retrieving each student. We are retrieving each student that is present in students data table, that is present in student table. And look at this, I have intelligence student.id. If I put here, what is that? That is an integer. Student not dot name string. You can see string. Student dot gender is also string. Student dot table is an integer. So at design time we know the types of each properties of the student. Okay, but whereas if you look at the other piece of code on the webform1.axpx, here we are not using a strongly typed dataset. So if you look at the code here, look at this, this is student class. This is the student class that we have created. Now to retrieve the you should retrieve the id column value. We are using this id string index here, the name of the column. Now if I misspelled this column name to 1 id, from id to id1, here look at this, instead of id, if I say id1, and if we go ahead and build the solution, do we get any compilation error? Look at that, it says build succeeded. So at compile time we'll not know about the error. So if I run this now, when it loads at runtime, actually think we implement this in the click event handler. So when it is null or empty, so if we don't have that, we click this button, we are going to get an exception. Means if I run this, and enter letter M and click button, we are going to an exception. So if we don't have that, we click this button, we are going to get an exception. Look at that, it says column id1. does not belong to stable student. So that is the problem with the untyped data set. You can't catch the errors at compile time if you misspelled them. Okay. But whereas with the strongly typed data set, so if you look at the strongly typed data set here, so if you look at the strongly typed data set, so instead of id, if I says id1, look at that, we get an error right away, the red line below this id1. There is no property with the name id1 basically, so that is the advantage of using strongly typed data set. Change it back to 0. Okay. So that is the advantage of using strongly typed dataset. You have intelligence or in number one, and number two, if you misspell anything, you will know about them at compile time itself. So in a strongly typed dataset, the database table columns become properties, and the type associated with each column is known at design time. So what is the advantage of using a strongly typed dataset over untyped datasets? Since in a strongly typed dataset, the database table columns become properties, and the type associated with each column is known at design time. Development is much easier as we have an intelligence, and any errors related to misspelled column names can be detected at compile time itself rather than at runtime. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.